Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Empowered to Live. I am your host, Andrew Rose Butler, and this is the podcast where faith meets purpose and purpose fuels freedom. And I am so glad that you are here with me on this evening. It's just wonderful as we wrap up. Can you believe it? The month of January, we have one more week, and already the first month of the new year is coming to a close and I am not ready. This month is already flying by. I couldn't even believe today was already Thursday, and I was like, where did the week and the month go? But that's what they said. Time flies when you're having fun, and even when you're not. So I appreciate all of you being here, and I'm just so excited. And as many of you know, I have been talking about our upcoming news episode that I will be starting called Visionary Voices. And next week is our pilot episode of our Visionary Voices segment. And just so pleased to have these three wonderful women of God who will be joining me on next Thursday evening as we talk about women living beyond fear and walking into purpose. And so I can't, watch out for that. We've been promoting and introducing these ladies to you all, and so, come out, join us next week to support this pilot episode of Visionary Voices. And like I said, it's been something that I have talked about doing this roundtable since sometime early last year, and it just never just seemed to come together. I didn't really have a title for it. Didn't know what I was going to do, how it was going to play out, what it was going to look like, and the ending of last year somewhere, things have started to fall into place. We got a title, and here we are. So next week, join me for Visionary Voices, and our topic is going to be tomorrow: women living beyond fear and walking in purpose. Sometimes you just have to do it afraid, and so let's um, thank these beautiful women for um, their willingness to join me. And like I said, check the social media, and you'll see more information about who they are and what they're all about. And then join us next Thursday for this special episode. It will be a little bit longer, so we may go an hour. Normally we are 30 minutes or so, but next week will probably be a 1 hour for this special episode, and then we'll have another one in April, one in July, another in October, and then in December. So they won't be every month. But so if you're also part of this listening audience and you would like to be a part of this roundtable discussion for the upcoming programs, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And I want to thank you all again for your support in the work that we are doing with this Empowered to Live podcast. I told y'all it's evolving, it is growing, and I don't know what it's going to look like, but we are growing and we are becoming, which is the foundation of what we do. Um, we are becoming women, we are empowering women, and we are stronger together when we support each other. So we're going to jump into this, our final week of our series, Foundations of Purpose. And today we're going to be finding purpose in the voice of God hearing the voice of God. And so we're focusing on recognizing God's voice and trusting His leading because He knows the plans that He has for us. We don't know what all He has planned out for us. We know that we were born and we're here in this earth for a purpose. No one is here by accident. God has a plan, as we talked about in our first episode, that before you were even conceived in your mother's womb, that God already called you with purpose, and He's already destined you for great things. And sometimes that great thing is not something like grand scheme, but it could be as simple as being an Andrew who brings his brother Peter to meet Jesus. Or it could be the simple thing of you being a blessing to someone and opening the door, smiling. We all that we make, we show up and in so many different ways in people's lives, and we make impact. And sometimes we don't even recognize the fact that we're doing. But if we go out every day and we're like, God, help me to be a light and be an ambassador, and touch to make an impact in someone's life, and we can go about our day and we may not even see the impact that we're making, but we are touching somebody's life in some way, shape, form, and fashion. And I pray that when we meet people, when we make that connection, whether it's in the grocery store, the doctor's office, or wherever you're running around, that you recognize that everyone that you come in contact with is a divine appointment. And we just need to hear God's voice as to what He's saying that we're supposed to be doing during that time, during that season. So our purpose is revealed through intimacy and obedience and not performance. So God doesn't want you to be performing when you're doing, His work, or when you're walking your purpose. He just wants you to one obedience step at a time. And so scripture for today is that my sheep hear my voice and I know them and they follow me. And I was thinking about that. There was a song we used to sing when I was young. It says, you say that I'm your shepherd, but why aren't you following me? My sheep hear my voice and they come running to me, but you say that I'm your shepherd, but why aren't you following me? And so it's about listening and hearing God's voice, and not just hearing. James says we're not only hearers of his word, but doers also. So it's not enough just for us to hear, but we also put action behind what we hear to make that step, to make that commitment. So, the question isn't, if God is speaking. God is always speaking. The question is whether or not you're listening. And again, purpose unfolds when we're in relationship with Him, when we, uh, and not just to revelation of things, but we need to be in that relationship so we know, so we can hear His voice. And you may be like me. Sometimes when God has sent me to do stuff, I have to be like Gideon. God, lay this sheepskin here. If it's your will, let the dew fall all around it, but don't wet it up. And then I'm like, God, I'm not sure if this is really you. So let the fleece be wet, and then let the ground around it be dry. Part the Red Sea. Do all these things. We want confirmation. And this is what happens when we don't necessarily know God's voice. When we're not in an intimate relationship, and we know that this is what God is telling us to do, and then we question, when we hear the voice. And sometimes, it's not, there's nothing wrong with questioning, because sometimes, it could be our own selves. We hear our own desires sometimes speak louder than the voice of God. And this is why it's important for us to be in relationship with Him, so we know without question whether or not this is God or not. And so when, because sometimes when God is speaking, He doesn't give us the whole picture. He doesn't lay out the whole route in which we are supposed to go. We have a destination. And just like your GPS doesn't show you, you can, pan out, but then you still don't even see fully the whole route. You know that there is a destination that you need to get to, and you know where you're starting, but what's along the way as you go, it reveals. And just like God, He's leading us. I mean, you have to hear His voice. And GPS will say sometimes, turn right in 100 feet. At the next traffic light, do this. And so it's revealing itself as you go. So as you're following the trajectory of that road, the GPS will speak to you. And the same thing with God, as you are obedient and as you're traveling on the plan out route that He has for you, He reveals and He gives direction to you. But you got to be listening. And sometimes, the things that we don't hear is because sometimes there's noise. There's a whole lot of noise. We're busy. Uh, we don't always get it right because of all the noise around us, the confusion that is around us, our own voice, our own fears. All of these things stand in the way. Other people, and their agenda, their wants sometimes will drown out the noise of what God is saying. Sometimes, you miss the GPS signal when it's telling you, turn, and you're just like, what did it say? And sometimes we get that way with God because there's so much noise, and we're listening. Sometimes we got our music playing and we're jamming out, and the GPS is trying to interrupt. And then, but we already have the song in our head that we're already singing to, so we miss what it says, and then we have to kind of pay attention and hope we didn't miss our turn. But then even when we do, like the GPS God is always willing to reroute you and get you back to the place where you're supposed to be, even when the noise drowns it out. And again, sometimes we are afraid. We're afraid of getting it wrong, and so we don't necessarily move when He's telling us to move. We're like, well, maybe that's not God. Well, maybe if it is, and but I made mistakes in the past, so I don't want to do this because what if I'm wrong? Again, and if you're wrong, God knows how to reroute you and get you back where you're supposed to go. He'll get you there. Nothing caught Him by surprise. He knew you were going to make that wrong choice. Because sometimes, you know, when I'm using GPS, sometimes I think I know where I'm going. I know how to start out. I know where I'm going, and there's a traffic jam, and I get there, and I'm like, man, that GPS was trying to warn me, but I knew where I was going. I know the shortcut, and I was like, no, hear my voice, and then even then GPS, like God will say rerouting. Expecting God to speak only in big moments. God speaks in everyday things. He's not so concerned about, people say, I pray and be like, should I wear this white dress or should I wear the blue one? God is not so much in those details. Those are choices that you can make. What should I eat for breakfast, God? Not, we can ask Him, but why? Why do we need to do that? That's a choice you need to make. That's a question you ask yourself. What do I want today? And those are simple choices. But in the small, sometimes the smaller stuff. Should I stay at this job? Should I leave this job? You know, should I get married? Should I not get married? You know, all these different things. God, are you calling me to go here? Those are some of the things, and not always in the major stuff. Not the major things, but sometimes God is speaking to you. And I think I've shared this before. Years ago, I was home and I was like running. I was rushing. The girls were little, and I kept hearing wait. And I was like, no, but I'm be running late. I got to drop the kids off at the babysitter, and I got to get to work, and all this other stuff, and da da da. And I'm just like rushing out the door, and I kept hearing wait. And the noise of the busyness, and it taught me a lesson, big lesson then. And I was like, no, I gotta go, I don't want to be late. Got the kids in the car, heading to the babysitter's house. Got almost to her house, and this lady rear-ended me. And I said, and I was like, okay, God, here we go. And then she was like, now I'm like, man, you hit me. And then she was like my neck, you caused the accident. And I'm like, how? And I was just coming here, just like all I could hear was that little child was saying, I should have just waited. So now here we stuck. We got to wait for the police to come. We got to wait for all of this. They just got all emotional. The kids were upset, and I end up going back home. I'm just like, I can't do this. I'm going home, call my boss. It's like, I know I got an accident. I'm just not, I'm shaking. The kids were crying. I'm just like, I just want to go home and lay down now. But if I had waited, none of that would have happened. And that taught me a valuable lesson that sometimes it's the small stuff that God is saying, just wait. Just wait. And sometimes He will cause things to happen and we override Him when He's like, just wait. And it's about listening and hearing His voice and that was a small thing. It wasn't a big thing, but He was saying wait because He knew what was happening. 2 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever. I just needed to wait. That He was like, all I kept hearing was wait, wait. And I'm like, wait for what? I'm rushing, gotta go. I got things to do. But I end up waiting anyway, and not in a good way. So sometimes it's the little things when God is speaking that we need to listen to. Again, doubting what we hear. Because that was me. I'm just like, no, I gotta go. God can be telling me to wait. Wait for what? He knows I gotta get to work. I gotta drop these kids off. I got this to do. I got that to do. But the waiting. And so me not fully hearing or listening, I heard Him say wait, and I repeatedly said wait. But sometimes, again, in the noise, our busyness, fear of getting it wrong, all of these things, doubting what we hear created a mess for me. But it taught me a lesson, like I said, because it's moments now when I'm hearing it within myself. It's a simple thing like, wait, don't leave yet, or don't go there. I've read about in relationship, God, in romantic and otherwise. Now that I've learned lessons, God, if this person does not mean well for me, remove them from my life. Who are the people that I need to separate myself from? Is not a major thing, because some of them were good people, but we weren't going in the same direction. And if we're not walking together and they're not part of the plan that God has for us, sometimes again, Vitala Medea says, sometimes people are leaves, sometimes people are branches, and sometimes people are roots. And we confuse the difference a lot of times. And sometimes people in our lives, they're just leaves. They're just here for a season and they need to go. Sometimes they're branches, they're a little bit sturdy, but they're not meant to be part of that, continue with you as a tree. Sometimes we have to cut off the branches so that we can grow. And we need to know that and understand it as well and honor that in our journey and where we're going. So how do we get past this? Create an intentional quiet time, so that you get to know his voice when God is speaking. And that also through his scripture, through his word. He wrote the Bible so we can know who he is. We know his character. I think Priscilla Shirer says it best. So when we get to know God, when we get to know his character, when something is done in a certain way, we can say, I know that's not God because I know him. It's like, you ever had that family member or friend who you know really well? I know, yeah, people can hide and whatever, but there are certain characteristics about people when you've been rolling with them for a long time. You know them, you know what they're all about. You're seeing different facets of who they are. You know their character, and you're like, no, that sounds out of character for this person, or for someone to say or do something. You're like, no, that's out of character. And then there's some people who when if somebody says this person said this, you're like, yeah, that's who they are. Yeah, yeah, I'm not surprised they said that or that they did that, and you just know. And so when we get to know who God is, we know his character, we're like, no, that's not who God is. I know him. I know his voice. That's not him. You can clone voices and all these different things. You have relationship. You can ask those deep questions. You have those secret questions and things that people know about you, and they know you well. And so when you get to know God and you know him well, through your intimate quiet time, intentional intimate time with him, through reading his word, you know, reading the word or getting it into your spirit, into your soul, so it's part of you. Where he said, my voice, my sheep know my voice, and they follow me, and a stranger they will not follow. And so we know who God is, and we know who he is intimately because we've spent that time with him. Um, Obey in small steps. Again, it's not the big stuff, it's the little stuff, the wait. And don't go there. I don't think you should go out. Sometimes you have your parents tell you stuff. And I love Ariel Fitz. She always says, I'm gonna see for myself. And then we come crawling back. And sometimes God is saying, no, that's not that. Don't go to that place. And you just have that sense, I shouldn't go there. And we're like, you know what? I'm not gonna go. And you don't know why. You can't explain it to anybody else. Someone say, well, why are you not gonna go? I don't know. I just feel like I should not go. That's God speaking. You know, when you're like, maybe I should buy this, and you hear that, no, don't buy it. Don't do that. And you're like, but I can afford it. And God is like, you want to say, that's not the point. I know what's coming because I know the plans that I have for you. I've seen it. I've written the days ahead of you. I know all about you. I know what plans I have. I know what's coming up the road. I know about the detours. I know what's happening. So don't do it until you get that feeling, and then we override it like me. We override the prompting of the Holy Spirit when He's saying, no, no, don't do that. Don't go here. Don't buy that. Don't call that person. Don't do this. And sometimes he's saying, do this. And we're like, no, I don't want to do that. Go talk to your neighbor. And you're like, I don't want to talk to those people. I don't know that. Give that person $5. Why? They're just going to waste it. We don't know why God is telling us what to do. It's the small stuff and that small obedience that He's expecting from us. Trust God is patient with your growth. He is. He is. He is so patient with us when in our growing in our growing to know Him, that He is patient with us. He's that loving parent who sees our attempts at walking in faith and walking in obedience. And then sometimes we stumble and we mess up and we miss it. But He's still saying, it's okay. I got you. Just get up and keep moving. We'll get it right next time. And we just have to keep moving until we trust God as we obey Him in those small steps and those small obedient steps that we trust Him in. And again, that comes through that intentional quiet time with Him. It's learning His voice through Scripture, through His Word. What is He saying to you? And when we don't know, we don't understand. Sometimes we read things and we're like, God, I don't understand. Sometimes I have to read it in different versions to see if I understand it. And then sometimes I'm just like, okay, I need to Google this because I really don't understand. I'm like, what are you saying? Because I don't know. And he will speak until we dig into that, so we know and that we understand what He's saying, and then take those small steps and know that He's there. Like I said, and even when we mess up, we don't have to fear failing, because God will get us back on track. He'll get us going where we need to go. So as we wrap up, you know, for my writers, when have you sensed God nudging you before, and how did you respond? When God has been saying to you, do this, don't do this. Uh, has He been saying something to you, take that job, don't take that job. How did you respond when He was nudging you towards purpose? And He was saying, go speak to your neighbor, go say hello to this person, go visit this person at the hospital, meet that phone call, and how did you respond to that, and what happened when you did? I'd be curious to find out what happened when you took that small step and obeyed God. Me living in Mexico was a small was a major nut when these doors were closing, and I'm like, God, what are you doing? And I was trying to pry these doors back open, and I was like, nope, I've shut this door. It's time to move. And I was like, no, but I don't want to go. I had plans. I had plans, and those plans did not involve me moving across the world. It involved me working until such and such time and doing this and this and that. And I was like, no, see, I have a different plan for you. I have a good plan for you. And it took obedience. Was I afraid? Absolutely. Moving to a country, I mean, I did it in the military, but I was supported there. And I was surrounded by a lot of people. And, we were kind of enclosed. And I've been in countries before where I didn't speak the language and all those different things. But this was different. And disobedience in doing it. And it's not the first time that God has me move. When we left New Jersey and went to Virginia, and then from Virginia went to Texas. Now here we are. The move back to Virginia was not so much the voice of God, but He worked it out anyway. And He had a plan in all of that and what He needed to be done. But then this move here to Mexico was God's nudging and speaking, and He took a planning. I was talking to someone, and she was like, you all planned this out." And I'm like, God was speaking, and He was just lining things up as we were obedient. He was directing, and He was putting things in place as we were moving and being obedient to His voice to make this transition. God moved and God put things in place that I could not imagine and fathom how He moved. And so when we are obedient to Him and He's nudging, and you're obedient, the scripture says that if you're willing and obedient, you eat the fat of the land. And so when we are willing and obedient, so not just hearing, like I said, James says not just being a hearer, but a doer. So it's a two-part. We have to hear and do. And that's what obedience looks like. Hearing and not doing is not obedience, but hearing and doing is. And so how do we make that transition? And so the challenge, our weekly challenge, yay for challenges. Choose one intentional quiet moment daily. So even it's 5 minutes spending is asking and ask God one question and listen without rushing. So take a moment, whether it's the night when when all the noise is silent, as you're preparing for bed and before you go to bed, pull yourself away. If you got family and husbands and children and all these different things, see if you can take 5 minutes, 2 minutes, and just sit with God. Our pastor says this on Sunday morning. When we quiet ourselves and we sit into that in that moment, and we just like, God, what do you want from me? you know what do you need from me in this moment? What are you trying to tell me in this moment? And then just quiet ourselves. A lot of times we rush out, we ask questions or we're praying, we have our laundry list of things that we want, and not necessarily what God is trying to tell us. And when they're sitting in that quietness, and I shared this before, that need to sit in the quietness and be like, God, what is it you need from me? Not that what I'm asking you for, but what do you need from me? What are you trying to tell me in this moment? And then just sit and listen. Get your notebook out and just sit and listen. And I'm gonna take my own advice. I'm gonna do it myself. And I hope I'm come making compare notes. And so it's like, God, what are you trying to tell me? What do you want to tell me? I've had some things. This visionary voice was kind of one of those things that came out of those quiet moments of God. What do you want from me, God? Give me direction on how this podcast is supposed to go, because I don't know. I've never done it before. I don't know how you want me to proceed. I don't know what it is that you that you want from me in this. Why am I doing this? And there's purpose behind it. And so asking those questions again, God, what do you want from me? What do you need from me? What do you need me to do? And then sit and listen. God, I want to hear from you. Open to quiet all the noise. There's a silence to noise in my mind, because our minds be like, I don't know about you. I hear songs, I hear all kinds of stuff going on in my head all the time. Silence the noise in my mind, silence the noise in my heart. Silence all of that stuff that drowns out your voice, and sit in the quietness. A lot of times we need noise, and we'll create noise just because. And so we'll sit in the quietness. 5 minutes may seem like a long time, but it's not. So let's sit about 5 minutes, even 5 minutes, and just sit with God and say, God, what do you want to tell me? And what do you need from me? And how can I move in obedience this week? How can I do that? Show me what you want from me. What do you want from me? I think that's a good question. What do you want from me? What are you requiring of me in this moment, in this time in my life? What do you want from me? And then listen. And it may not come like right then, but then he'll begin to show you, just like that GPS. He'll begin to tell you as you're open to hearing, God, what do you want from me? He could speak to you now, but he can also speak to you in the days ahead. And that's my prayer, that you will begin to hear his voice in such a way that you are beyond a reasonable shadow of a doubt, that this is the voice of God, that he is directing you, that he's leading you. And then not only are you hearing and that you're willing, but you're also doing. Again, um, willingness or hearing without action is not obedience. And so we need to take action and do and do. So I want to thank you all again for joining me. Purpose is not found in the loud, it's revealed in the listening. So we listen and hear his voice and what he is saying. And then again, join us next week for our Visionary Voices segment here on the podcast. And I'm so super excited. So I'm going to stay rooted, stay obedient, and stay empowered as you listen to God's voice as he's speaking to you in the end of this day and in the weeks to come. You all have a wonderful night, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. Good night.